However, implementation of the Philippine government's rice productivity program is costly, inefficient, and ineffective. In 2001, the government introduced a new technology called hybrid rice. Its adoption was aggressively pursued by the government through the Hybrid Rice Commercialization Program, or HRCP. Under the HRCP, production of hybrid rice seeds is supported by the government through procurement of seeds at a guaranteed price, distribution of the procured seeds to participating farmers at half the procurement price, and payment of additional money to participating farmers to help defray their fertilizer input cost. The government has devoted significant resources through a system of subsidies to supporting the HRCP. However, the results are not encouraging. The adoption rate of hybrid rice is very low. There is a high dropout rate among participating farmers because hybrid rice seeds are so expensive and farmers have to purchase them every planting season rather than using them, which would result in drastically decreased yields. The massive government subsidies have distorted the ability of farmers to make an informed choice between hybrid and inbred rice varieties. The special products arguments of the World Trade Organization increase the pressure to maintain the existing high levels of food protection in the country. Special products treatments provides developing countries with the flexibility to implement tariff reduction programs over an extended period for certain self-designated products. These special products discussions are based on food security, livelihood, and rural development arguments. This research report assesses the poverty and income distribution implications of trade reform that is focused on agriculture and major food items such as rice, corn, sugar, beef, chicken, pork, processed meat products, fruits and vegetables, and processed fruits. In the Philippines, a dynamic recursive computable general equilibrium model calibrated to the social accounting matrix for the Philippine economy of the year 2000 and a micro-simulation model that uses the 2000 family income and expenditure survey are used to analyze policy shifts. The simulation results indicate that trade reform in agriculture and major food items will have favorable effects on farmers' prices and bring about a significant reduction in consumer prices. Real household income will increase while poverty and income inequality decline. These findings, therefore, imply that maintaining existing trade protections on agriculture and major food items which drive food prices up will not solve the problem of poverty and income inequality in the Philippines.
Irrigation is not only contributes to increased crop yield production but also reduce variability in production through improved control of the crop environment. However, the dependence of modern seed fertilizer technology on irrigation and fertilizer, which are subject to unreliable supply, may contribute to increased variability in production. This paper examines these issues using an irrigation system simulation model to analyze the impact of irrigation on the variability in area, yield, production, and farm income in diversion irrigation system. The results shows that irrigation more than doubles crop year rice production and income. However, because of the independence of diversion irrigation systems on highly variable dry season stream flow, irrigated rice season production and income are highly variable compared with those of wet season rain-fed production. On a crop year basis, production and income variability under irrigated conditions are slightly higher than under rain-fed conditions, although improved management of irrigation systems can reduce income and production disparities among farmers within.
The Philippines is the world's 8th largest rice producer. Its arable land totals 5.4 million hectares. Rice area harvested has expanded from nearly 3.8 million hectares in 1995 to about 4.4 million hectares in 2010. However, the country's rice area harvested is still very small compared with that of the other major rice-producing countries in Asia. More than two-thirds or 69% of its rice area is irrigated. The country's production increased by a third from 10.5 million tons in 1995 to 15 million tons in 2010. 71% of the rice production came from irrigated areas. Although yield improved from 2.8 tons per hectare in 1995 to 3.6 tons per hectare in 2010, it was still very below the yield potential of the modern variety. Rice is a staple food for most Filipinos across the country. Nation's per capita rice consumption rose to 93.2 kilograms per year in 1995 to 123.3 kilograms per year in 2009. Similarly, per capita caloric intake from rice rose to 917 calories per day in 1995 to 1,213 calories per day in 2009. Protein requirements from rice on average increased from 29.7% in 1995 to 34.8 per person per day in 2009.
The Philippine government efforts toward the attainment of increased production are reflected in the large investment made in irrigation, construction, and rehabilitation during the last 2 decades. These investments are generally made by National Irrigation Administration, or also called as NIA, which is responsible for the supervision, operation, and maintenance of irrigation systems in the country. Considerable improvements in rice yields and production were observed in the period of irrigation expansion, mainly due to complementaries among modern rice varieties. Future rice production increases depend on the performance of individual irrigation systems. It should be noted that the heavy burden on irrigation of increasing Philippine rice production through improvement yields in irrigated areas may not be attainable in the near future unless major problems. These problems relate to: first, the design and planning of systems; second, operation and maintenance; third, water management problems; fourth, collection of irrigation service fees; fifth, current economic. The design and planning of systems. This is incompatibility between the irrigation system design and the actual method of water allocation and distribution, and this affects the level of operation and maintenance in terms of activity and cost requirements, for is quite considerable. Operation and maintenance. NIA's severe shortage of funds and equipment to properly maintain specific irrigation facilities, together with the lack of physical facilities, has led to the inability of individual systems to ensure adequate, equitable, and timely distribution of water to farmers' beneficiaries. Water management problems. Effective water management essentially requires a close coordination between NIA and the farmers' beneficiaries through the community, organizers, and farmer associations. However, the success of the participatory approach in water management largely depends on, first, the perceived need of farmers to participate in farmers' association; second, the perceived need of NIA regarding farmer assistance in water management. Collection of irrigation service fees arising from poor operation and management performance has led to the lack of credibility of the NIA, with farmers' beneficiaries are reflected in the low irrigation service fees affected. Unfortunately, this has led to a vicious cycle of decreased funds of operation and maintenance, less operation and maintenance, greater farmers' frustration, and lower payments of fees. Current economic environment. The shift in the government emphasis in sector other than irrigation, delay in the release of projects funds, which resulted in the delayed prosecution. Policy issues in rice crop protection. Man's efforts to increase rice protection to meet the growing food need is hampered by the increasingly serious problem of protecting the rice crop from pests through the years. Alternative pest control strategies have been developed and recommended. These varied from the use of chemicals or pesticides, various cultural practices, or biological control. This is to present and evaluate important issues involved in the problem of pest control and attention to focus on two topics. First, pesticides use and pest management in the Philippines. On the screen now is the pesticide use and the problems with pesticides. Proper use generates problems and adverse side effects such as ecological disruption, environmental contamination, residues on food and feed, toxic and other adverse effects on man and other non-target organisms. This two-sided nature of pesticides brings up several interrelated questions such as, are we satisfied with the current state of affairs? Even on the assumption that we are could additionally measures result in a safer environment? What are the constraints in our having a safer environment? Are we doing something about the problem? One measure calls for a more rigid evaluation of pesticides for registration. However, a hindrance to the effective implementation of this measure is the limited expertise of the Fertilizer and Pesticide Authority, or called FPA. With respect to the evaluation, for example, the FPA does not have enough expertise in toxicology, which is a critical area for evaluation. Other measures suggested to attain a safer environment with pesticide use are a substitution of highly toxic compounds with less hazardous substitutes, and dissemination of information about the hazardous effects of pesticides. Efficiency productivity issue. On the other hand, the application of pesticides has proven to be effective in the prevention of crop losses, thus assuring to some extent stable rice supply and price levels. On the other hand, the high cost of chemical inputs and the cost of application cannot be ignored. The following question is raised: how economically profitable is it to prevent yield losses with pesticides? The basic finding of the studies undertaken to resolve this question was the high levels of insect control added more to production cost than to the value of the yield. Using the ratio of added returns as a measure of economic profitability, it was found out that the lowest level of application was most profitable. The paper notes that the conclusion obtained in these studies is limited because it does not include farmers' level of application, since underdosing, applying below regulation of pesticides and its implementation. The FPA has been mandated with the immense task of regulating and monitoring pesticides used in the Philippines since 1977. To start with, there was a low level of expertise on pesticides in both the government and private sectors, and FPA operated with limited staff support and resources. After 8 years of operation, the agency is still faced with similar constraints. There are still a dire need for support mechanism and experienced personnel to help develop and implement its various functions and programs. The paper reiterates the importance of the following measures to help mandated objectives: a coordinated plan under with professionally trained and experienced personnel from agencies that are directly or indirectly involved in the pesticide industry may be taped to minimize the cost and maximize the efficacy of FPA. The training of laboratory and extension personnel at all levels of agricultural management, the continuing inspection and investigation of pesticide use, licenses and marketing samples, with enforcement or legal action as a final resort to ensure safe and effective programs. Closer attention to the field aspects of regulation to protect the small farmers. For example, there is a need for the establishment of necessary checks on the classification of mislabeling of pesticides. Local manufacture of pesticides and nationalism in trade. The local manufacture of pesticides has its advantages and disadvantages. On the other hand, the establishment of a local facility to manufacture pesticides could easily lead to price reduction, as experienced by Malaysia with Paraquat, wherein a local pesticide facility can utilize by the products of existing manufacturing facilities. On the other hand, the local manufacture pesticides could be a possible source of environmental contamination problems resulting from byproducts and wastes of plants. The issue that needs to be settled as whether or not we are technologically prepared to minimize the pollution potentially of a local pesticides facility so that what happened in Bhopal would not be repeated. With respect to the policy on nationalism in trade, a positive step that has been reiterated is for FPA. On pest management is a control strategy that combines chemical, biological, and natural agents in controlling pests in order to balance yield loss, environmental safety, and farmers' capabilities and resources. The basic idea of pest management has gained wide acceptance, but its effective implementation has barely started in the Philippines. There is a need to expand research and development programs on pest management systems.